Hello everyone, this is a summary of the Conditional Kingdom video. The Conditional Kingdom video was about conditional prophecy as it relates to the establishment of the premillennial kingdom. So in this video, we're basically going to go through a summary of the information that we went through in the last video, although since the last video was pretty long, this is just to give you the basic ideas that were gone through in that video without going through all the detail or the actual information itself. So I linked the other video below, so if you watch this and would like to see the other for a more expanded version with a lot more information, then you have the link there. So we started off with defining what the word conditional means and what conditional prophecy really is. And basically what we saw is that something being conditional just means that certain things need to happen in order for it to come to pass, and that being conditional does not mean that it may or may not happen, but it just means that it may or may not happen to you or to me, as in we can choose. It's conditional upon what we choose whether we will be a part of its fulfillment, but its fulfillment is not necessarily not going to happen. So anyways, in the last video we saw three different categories of prophecy relating to the establishment of the kingdom. The first was conditional prophecy, in which it is explicitly stated that the conditions are upon the people, as in, if you obey, I will do this; if you do not obey, I will do this. The second category is prophecies with ridiculous conditions, obviously ridiculous. And we saw there certain, you know, in the sense of being obviously ridiculous, it's conditions like, if you can cause the sun and the moon to, leave their appointed paths, then I'll break my covenant with David. And you get the idea there. And then the third category is not conditional prophecies, or prophecies that simply just state, I will do this. Or it could be prophecies that actually state, regardless of if you're disobedient and if you break my covenant, I will not break my covenant and I will fulfill this anyways. So those are the three categories. In the first category, I'll just reference very quickly some of the scriptures that were there, representative scriptures, it's not an exhaustive list of that category of scriptures. We see there, we had Leviticus 26 verses 3 and 4, Deuteronomy chapter 28 verse 1. In the second category, which is ridiculous conditions, we had Jeremiah chapter 31 verses 35 to 37 and Jeremiah 33 verses 19 to 26. In the not conditional prophecy, we had Genesis 12 verse 7, Ezekiel 36 17 to 38, and Psalm 89 verses 3 and 4 and verses 28 to 37. So after we went through all that, what we did was we addressed we first addressed the first category, conditional prophecy, to see if it was being correctly understood. The reason for this is because we did not want to assume that we were correctly understanding every category and then try to harmonize each category to fit another one. Because in doing this, we would easily and very likely strip the meaning of the scriptures of one particular category to try and fit the meaning of our personally preferred category. So we decided not to do that, but rather to seek to understand the categories better and what we found is that they are already in harmony. So starting with the first category, conditional prophecy, what we found is that those prophecies that are conditional do not, just as they are, as we take them, those prophecies do not disannul or make of none effect or make void the promises that were made to Abraham. We saw this according to Deuteronomy chapter 5 verse 3 and Galatians chapter 3 verses 16 to 18. And that was a conceptual context of those particular prophecies, because it showed that conceptually that covenant, the conditional covenant, is not the same as the promise made to Abraham. Next we saw in the textual context of those conditional prophecies, it's not that they were saying, if you obey, the covenant will be fulfilled, and if you disobey, it won't be fulfilled. Rather, we saw that it was laying out two scenarios. Scenario A, would be if they are obedient, they would go into the land and never be plucked up. Scenario B was that if they would go into the land and then be disobedient, would be scattered among the nations, but then at the end of days would be gathered again into the land of promise. So we saw that according to Leviticus 26, the whole chapter, but particularly verses 42 to 45. Also Deuteronomy chapter 28, 29, and 30, but particularly Deuteronomy 30, verses 1 to 8. Also a passage relevant to that we did not read was Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 30 and 31. Also what we found is that when people suppose that the covenant will not come to pass, or the fulfillment of the promises concerning the land of Israel will not to come to pass, because they're saying it's conditional upon the obedience of the people, we found that that idea is presupposing the thought that there will not be an additional people or an obedient people. And what we did see is that there will be an obedient people, as described in Revelation chapter 14, verses 1 to 5. Particularly, we looked at verses 1, 4, and 5. Also, a thought that we did not cover in the last video is that if we consider some of the information given in the video titled The Premillennial Kingdom, in that video we saw that Christ is interceding for his people and cleansing the sanctuary. Now, what we did not cover in the last video is that that cleansing also extends to earth, and he'll be cleansing his people on earth. There's many prophecies dealing with this, which we won't get into at the present time, but Malachi chapter 3, verses 1 to 3, and also verse 6, specifically, although the whole chapter is relevant, passages such as that show us that he will purify a people, and through them, these promises will be fulfilled. We also saw that all these things really show that the prophecies will be fulfilled either way, no matter if people chose scenario A or scenario B, if they're disobedient or not, because either way we fall into a side of prophecy. We can choose if we're on the good side or the bad side, but it will be fulfilled. To conclude the last to conclude the last study, we looked at verses that deal with the concept that prophecy must be fulfilled. And the verses that we looked at to see that concept are verses such as Mark 14:49, Matthew 15:17, James 1:17, Deuteronomy 18, verse 22, Isaiah 34, verse 16, and Isaiah 55, verses 10 and 11. So, to conclude the whole thing, what we saw is that within these three categories of prophecies related to the premillennial kingdom, section 2 and 3 are teaching the same basic message, and section 1, conditional prophecy, that is dependent upon the obedience of the people, is the only section that is really taken to be something other than it is. In other words, it's been misunderstood. So by going to seek to understand that section better, we came to the conclusion that that section is teaching the same truth as sections 2 and 3. In other words, section 1, we saw that although it's saying it is conditional upon the obedience of the people, it is already given with the understanding that whether they keep the covenant or break the covenant, that does not disannul the covenant that was given 430 years earlier to Abraham. Also, that covenant will be fulfilled either way. It's just that the people have a choice as to if it will be a direct or a fast track to the fulfillment or a detour to the fulfillment, scenario A, scenario B. Also, we saw that there will be an obedient people, so it's not a problem. Now, I know I just repeated the same thing as I explained before, but it's necessary to recap that again in a conclusive sort of way to explain why those various elements show us that that section of prophecy is not in disharmony with the rest. So I hope you can see the reasons why those passages have been misread, but the reasons why the correct reading is the way that was presented in the previous video. So anyways, hopefully this ties everything together for you. Again, if you want to discuss this, you can either comment on this video or the last video, or send me a private message or a message on this YouTube channel. So blessings to you all. I hope that you've had a good time investigating this and will continue to investigate this. So shalom and farewell.